Welcome, everybody, to Paranormal Round Table. I'm your host, Josh Turner, a.k.a. Wolf, and with me, as always, is my amigo,
Sal. How's it going, everybody? Glad to be here.
Glad to be here, absolutely. We have a special today. We have a guest. He has his own show called the Venomous Fringe. His name is Chris Edge.
Chris Edge.
He's living on the edge.
Definitely.
And he's going to be on our show, and we're going to be talking some Dogman. Okay, so Chris is on the air with us. Chris, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we've been talking about some different things, and of course, I started the Paranormal Round Table, and you've been a big supporter of it, and I really appreciate it. And I'm also a fan of your work on Venomous Fringe. Anybody that knows Chris has a show that's pretty successful, and I knew that it would be.
Ditto on that for me. Ditto on that, man. You got a good thing going there.
Yeah,
Keep it up, brother.
So what I was gonna say is, like, tonight we brought you on so that you could talk some Dogman, and we are probably going to do this again a couple more times, because I would like your opinions about some other things. Like we said, not just the Dogman, but like other cryptids. But for tonight, for this episode, myself and Sal, just want to hear you talk about your Dogman, what you want to talk about, Dogman. And I don't mean like we're going to ask you a bunch of questions. Just give us the scoop on what you think is going on with this cryptid, and any stories that you want to tell, and you have the floor.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you both for the kind words and the compliments towards the Venomous Fringe, as well as I want to thank everyone who is listening in tonight, as well as you guys. And I mean, personally, the Paranormal Roundtable is a very creative idea. It's a good concept too, because I noticed that with a lot of people who end up on Vic's show, they end up doing their own side work, and in this case, the Paranormal Roundtable, the work of Josh Turner and his team. I mean, I got to be honest. I mean, I've listened to all your episodes so far, and I will say that you guys have a great style. You have a good presentation towards the whole concept of what paranormal is, and in general, cryptid discussions. And I mean, you guys are reading stories and just discussing opinion and theory, and it's very good content. I really praise it, and I just want to say you guys are doing a fantastic job as well. So please, I mean, keep up the great work on that. But for me, Dogman. Now, the Dogman is a very interesting topic, because for some people out there who aren't familiar with my work, and as what Josh has mentioned with Venomous Fringe and whatnot, the name Chris Edge is what we coin, and I've been doing this for nearly over a decade. I've only been researching for approximately half a decade. I started as an enthusiast while reading some of Linda Godfrey's work, and then proceeded to listen to several podcasts and radio shows in reference to this topic. And a long story short, in the past 5 years, I've come across many people who are familiar with the Facebook groups and other eyewitnesses and researchers out there who've come accordingly to this field, as well as also taking notes, and since then have followed my own research. Now, the term of the Dogman, if some people out there who are kind of curious or familiar with what I normally do is on my show, for example, we discussed last week, guys, the briefing on my episode when I interviewed you guys was, we talked about how there could be a different name for these creatures, how Dogman could not be an appropriate term. Now, I actually turned to the audience, and I spoke to the community for a brief period, and asked, like, would Dogman be an appropriate term? Do you call one of these things? And the results that came out of it, a lot of people, and it's intriguing to me, was they preferred, it was a tie between werewolf and man-wolf. And the reason why I bring this up, because it's a little, we're going a little off tracks here, I do apologize, is because a lot of people, when they find the source of this cryptid, is we're dealing with something here that could easily has a relationship in the canine branch, but it seems that Dogman might be too much of a goof name for some. But personally, Dogman is a name that's been coined to call for one of these things. But for man-wolf, I say that werewolf and Dogman are two different creatures of their own sense. But other than that, though, when we're talking Dogman, I just wanted to throw that out there with how many people feel with the term of Dogman. Plus, man-wolf seems to be a very good term for them as well. I know we talked about it briefly on my show, but Yeah, I mean, the thing with dogmen is that I feel that for a creature that you're dealing with is I have the opportunity sometimes, and when I talk in some of the groups and when I proceed to do something on my show, I like to do these excuse me, these Q&As, these certain talks that I have in interacting with people who follow my content. And the reason why I do that is because I ask for the community's feedback in a sense. And when I talk with dogmen, there's so many theories, there's so many opinions that for a lot of individuals out there, this is still a relatively brand new creature to so many. You think of when we think of dogmen, you would assume that you're dealing automatically with a werewolf. And I would 99% agree with you that that's the perfect way to start off when you start talking about one of these things, because it's such a taboo type thing when these creatures, for what they are, it's a tough pill to swallow. It really is. It truly, I've sat down with eyewitnesses who have told me their fair share of stories. And one of the stories I have permission to share with you guys is a story that I had told on Vic's show, but I'll give you guys a runner up to it because there is a follow up to it. That's something I didn't mention on Vic's show.
Awesome. Lay it on us, brother.
And this was a story that I had collected from someone who I know. And this individual is a normal average day hiker. He's never left the house to ever say, even in the rain. And he said, I'll never go out and hike, even if it's on a rainy day. He's always went out and hiked. So this is an average day hiker. He's in your normal woods left and right. And this occurrence happened in November of 2016. Now, what happened was that this guy was in the Pine Barrens and he was with another friend. And for some people out there who aren't familiar, real quick, not to get off subject, but the Pine Barrens is a very notorious piece of land. It's located in South New Jersey, Southern Jersey. It's a very, very well-known hotspot for paranormal and mysterious activity, from Satanist cults to um, possible sources of weird phenomenon of paranormal demons, ghosts, and the Jersey Devil. So this place is filled with a lot of phenomenon. It's just not your average day area or resort. So anyways, they're camping in the woods and they are at the campfire. And there's a lot of rustling going on in the bushes down up ahead. And the thing is that when you're in the Pine Barrens, there's certain small campgrounds that you don't have to necessarily like rent anywhere or you have to put any fees down, because I know some places do that. But there's some small grounds, and then some people just camp on their own and don't even bother. And they were somewhere close to where there was a lot of like trees. And this is, mind you, this is early, close to winter or like mid fall. So around this time, wind is blowing and everything is just blooming at this point in time. So these guys are going out and they hear this rustle, but this rustle is very violent. So at first they thought it was maybe an animal gotten stuck, because there were reports of deer around the environment. And they get up, get their searchlights, and proceed to walk around. This is around close to midnight, so you got to remember too. When you're out and about like this, you never want to go to bed unless you go to bed real late. Unless you're out and about early in the highs of morning, depending on how you see it. But these guys weren't out hunting; they were just doing a normal camping, just enjoying the peace and quiet. So they walk. They're going north where this rustle's heard, and the rustling in the twig in the trees and everything, it stops. And then they didn't say they heard any footprints or anything. They didn't hear no footprints. They didn't hear any footsteps. And they just keep walking. They keep going straight. And then next thing you know, this one individual proceeds to shine his flashlight into a couple bunch of branches and sees these glowing amber eyes just looking right at him. And from his height to this creature's height, it was approximately it was literally close to him saying 7 to 8 feet tall. So, and this guy's 5'11". So there's a height difference big right there. And he was able to see this, and he didn't get a good look at the body. He was mostly looking at the face, and the face, as he recalls, looked like something you'd see in hell. Now, They both darted. They turned around and just head straight toward the campsite. They didn't even bother to pick up some of the supplies. They left a couple things there. There was a water jugs there. There was a couple coolers, and they left a mirror there. They used the mirror for shaving in the morning and whatnot. But they just took whatever they could take. They got into the pickup and just bolted out of the site. And it wasn't until I started doing this stuff is when stuff by me by podcasting. It wasn't until then that my friend had noticed, and this is this individual, and he had noticed that I had a sketch of the LBL Beast, which is the infamous Bart and Nunnally sketch that some might be familiar with. If not, it's a very good sketch. And he had seen it, and he was a little upset about it because it looked like something that he'd seen before. And I had talked to him for a little bit, and I had said to him, I was like, "Listen, whatever it is, just be honest with me." And I'm very straightforward with that kind of stuff. And he had admitted to me what he had seen, and it had messed him up because personally he felt very uncomfortable talking about it because of the fact that he had to explain this, but also in a sense that wasn't for something that was traumatic to see. And this is where you get that few seconds of PTSD that enters into the shrine. This is kind of where that comes from. And I wouldn't say necessarily that it was an experience that easily he would have imagined would happen, but did. And he was it was broken about it. And this was something that he had changed his lifestyle around. He hiked now with groups of people versus alone or with a couple. And he refuses really to camp as much anymore, but still goes out hiking. And I had invited him back out to the Barrens last year because I wanted to take a good look at this place and see for myself where exactly this incident took place. The problem was that when I had brought this up to him, he was very stricken about it. He was still traumatized, and this was going on 2 years last year. And it took a lot to talk to him. We brought a group of people out. We all went, and the environment itself, like I felt this very cold type presence. And I've never talked about this before because for a show like Paranormal Round Table, I think it'd be something great to talk about. And it was a very cold like experience, and it was a very hot day. It was the summer, but I can feel in the environment I was in, I felt like almost like a negative sense. And I don't know if it was because of what I was told about this place or if it was because I just don't know if it was just the facts that there was something there that was channeling my maybe immune system and just made me feel sick to my stomach a little bit. And I proceeded to stay. We were there for about an hour, and then we called it quits, and we had went somewhere locally that was more into civilization, so to keep the day going. But that time there was very uncomfortable. I don't know if it was because of what I was told about it, or there was something that knew we were there. And it's interesting because my other friend kind of felt the same way. So we were so a couple of us felt like the same thing, but at the same time, I knew what was going on because of what I was told, and no one else besides the other guy, my one friend, the individual who saw this thing, knew. So that is the short but very unnerving follow up to the story I talked about on episode 153 of this one individual who's one of my friends saw this thing in the Barrens, and it traumatized him deeply. So, I mean, for me, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that's it's not the most exciting encounter, but it shows how the power and energy these things can manifest.
Yeah, so let me get this straight. Like you went to the same spot where this person had the encounter?
The same area,
yeah. And you felt something almost spot. I'm sorry for talking over you, but you felt something almost like it was like a darkness, like evil?
I wouldn't say it was a darkness. It just felt like a very unnerving feeling. And maybe it is. Maybe I don't want to admit it was a darkness because I've never had that experience before, and maybe it could be sort of being in denial. but it just felt because when you get nauseous, like you feel like you're gonna vomit. You feel like that was how I felt when I was there after only a couple minutes in, and I was relaxing a little bit. I laid up by a tree and I was just taking it easy. So I mean, but still, that was what I felt. It was just a very tempting case of like nausea almost.
I was thinking about that as far as feeling that feeling. A lot of people that have reported encounters with, in this case, I'm going to say man wolf because like dog man just doesn't really do it justice because dog implies, a domesticated canine, whereas wolf, man wolf does not imply that because a wolf and a dog are two different stories when you look at them separately. They're cousins, but, totally different. Anyways, many people have reported feeling that kind of like a buzz or whatever, something just really getting at them in those areas. And him already having that experience and you go back there, you're going back there and you felt that. Some may say psychosomatic, but to me, I don't think so. I would be inclined to say something was probably there, something watching you, because we all have as human beings, we all have that, so if somebody's staring at you, you feel like they're watching you.
Yeah, you can feel it when they're looking at you.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what you experienced there, Chris.
What about this? I wanted to propose this. There's a bridge, of course, we've talked about it, the Goatman Bridge up in Dallas. And since we talked about it on the show briefly, we did a little more research.
Yeah.
People report feeling menaced just being on that bridge. And seconds before their encounter, they can feel like a predatory sense before that they see this thing. And I have heard that before with Dogman. There was a show I did with Vic, and I'm not going to get into a long thing or whatever, but there were some people that were having problems in their house. Their house was haunted, and I talked about that. It was some people that lived not far from where I grew up. And I don't know if you've ever heard the episode, Chris, and I actually couldn't even tell you which one it was. It might have been 169 or 186. I don't know. But I talked about it on Vic's show, and I did some investigating on that case. And the child was seeing a shadow man, but he was also seeing a wolf, a canine cryptid creature on two legs that was coming up to the window. And he would see this wolf man, but he was also seeing the shadow man in the house. And of course, this wolf man was stalking around the property. Now, since that case, since I actually did that show, I actually got more information about that case. And actually, me and you, Sal, have talked about that in depth. And the guy admitted that he lied. Like, he had actually seen the creature once before. And he had actually lied to his wife. And I found out because I'm good friends with that guy's brother. So he told me, he says, yeah, he basically told him, one day when they were working, whatever, that he didn't want to scare his wife. So he had seen it almost when they first moved in, which is something that I didn't know when I first presented that case on Vic's show on Dogman Encounters. And so now that I've looked back at that case, I'm planning, of course, like a million other cases, going back and doing more in-depth storying about it, on our show. But the odd thing is that he always said he never felt like he was alone, like when he was on the property. And when you talk about feeling cold and feeling like there was a presence of evil, that one time when they had baled some hay, that he was feeling like there was something stalking around the property. He couldn't see it, but he felt it. And he said that he felt like at some point, in the day, he would feel almost ill to his stomach or sick. And then he would get that feeling of dread that just would not go away. And that's what he has told me since I've talked to him, since that the case, has developed a little more. And he himself has opened up more, not just his wife, but he was telling me that he would get that sense. And then before he or his wife would have an encounter with either the spiritual entities in the house or with this wolfman creature, that they would have that feeling of dread. And then, of course, I talked about that, I think, in Vic's show on 248, I believe. There was a friend of mine that she lived in Waco, and when we began to talk on the way over there about this house that she lived in, there was a spirit entity that would sometimes appear as a clown-looking entity, not with a big red nose and and whatever, but it had like big feet, and it wore a weird looking like a shirt, like a suit looking that almost looked like kind of clownish to the child. And whenever they would see this wolf like entity, they saw it crawling around in the carport, and that it would trigger like this fight or flight sense in these people, and they would talk about feeling cold in the house, a sense of dread, sickness to the stomach, almost nausea. She said one time that when she actually got sick, her and her little brother got sick, and they didn't know what was wrong with them. They went to the doctor. The doctor was like, well, it's some kind of stomach flu or stomach virus, whatever. But they couldn't tell them what it was, and it lingered. And that sometimes that they would feel this, and then it went away, but then they would relapse, and they would get that illness dealing with this, whatever presence was there was starting to make them ill. And so they started to put two and two together, that they believed that it was these entities or entity that was doing it. And of course, one of them was a wolf-like creature. The funny thing was, just like the situation I was dealing with, where the little child was seeing the wolf man in the window, the wolf-like entity never came in the house. It just stalked around the outside of the property. And this other entity, this shape-shifting type entity or whatever, was in the house. And it tended to be like that. So I've kind of wondered oftentimes, like, is it the entity that was in the house was attracting the wolfman's attention? Was it drawn to that?
Were they working in tandem?
Were they working in tandem? Or as I had someone propose a theory to me from the Paranormal Round Table group, they private messaged me, and we actually spoke about this a little bit the other day. They were telling me that they thought that sometimes these entities, like maybe they come from the same sort of portal.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe these wolfmen, they are attracted to the portal, or they're looking for it or coming from it.
Yes.
As we have spoken before about the Jinn and how they say that they have neighbors. Maybe these are their neighbors. Because I've only gotten one weird case about a cryptid beyond the Dogman, Goatman type, whatever, that was just so far out there, and it was what looked from someone's perspective, looked to be a centaur type entity.
Oh.
And so that was very odd, and that came out of Oklahoma.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I haven't talked about that, Sal. I haven't seen you in a few days, so I got that one I was going to tell you about. But we could get into that on the next show. But anyway, just to now, I guess we're digressing, as you say.
Yes, we are.
So, this is what I'm telling you, though, Chris. Like, I totally get what you're saying about that, because we have heard this before. This is something that has come up more than a couple times, and I could go into more, but I'm not here to do that. Like I said, I just wanted to get that out there so to make you know and feel assured that this does happen. There is a connection. You're not alone. And I do disagree with some of the shows and some of the. I understand that several of the groups out there that I belong to, the Dogman groups and whatnot, that they try to separate the supernatural from this creature. But I don't. The more I learn about it and the more I study it, I don't really think you can do that. I think that there is too much of a supernatural element to all of this. I know that they say Bigfoot is a living flesh and blood creature, and a lot of squatchers will be straight up about that's just a flesh and blood creature. Well, I think that it is when it's on our plane of existence. But I think that the Sasquatch, just like the Dogman and the Goatman and all these other things, I think that they move in and out of our existence.
Let me just say this, because I had spoken to another YouTuber by the name of Abnormal Truth. I had spoken to him briefly yesterday about, well, at the time of this airing, the 29th, and we were talking about how dogmen and werewolves, that these creatures do have supernatural abilities. Now, I'm someone who always tries to stay between dogmen being flesh and blood and werewolves being supernatural, but werewolves, I would think, could these be werewolves that in many cases report scenario of them being aggressive and possessing supernatural abilities? And could dogmen be actual flesh and blood creatures, but not as on the same par with what a werewolf can do, such as possess a supernatural ability to survive, or something that is completely abnormal to our normal human equivalents?
Well, if I may interject on that one,
Absolutely, please,
Chris,
please.
um, speaking about the paranormal aspect versus the flesh and blood aspect, for lack of better words, Dogman, aka Man Wolf, whatever you want to call them. One thing Vic said it many times in his shows, and he talks in all of his guests that he's talked to about how the Dogman stays in that form. That is his form permanently on this plane of existence. When you think of werewolf, you think of transformation. That being the primary primary aspect or quality about them, that they transform from a human to a werewolf. I was thinking about the little short video that was put out by DDoS from the BDRP channel. And he posted a snippet about the Mangum, Oklahoma werewolf girl story. That was really interesting because that involved supernatural elements within that story. And if you want to listen to it, folks, you can go to the BDRP channel, DDoS, and listen to it. You'll find it in there. I found some, with that story, I found some really interesting points, of course, being that the story, to give you a short rundown, is this guy used to go to school with this girl. This girl was part of this family. It was kind of strange. Everybody knew who they were in town. They'd been there for a long time as a family. But they were kind of ordinary, but, not the greatest looking, so on and so forth. But that this girl had unusual hair back of her neck, always wore stuff like turtleneck sweaters, things like that, to hide a lot of her skin. And long story short, this person that told this story stated that one day, living out in the country, he goes down to the river messing around, and that he saw this particular girl, and they were young teenagers, maybe 13, 14, around there. She was down at the river. He saw that she was there, and he saw that she was taking off her clothes. So, he first saw her, got interested, teenagers do that. And he watched her. She took off all her clothes, and then she transformed. And later on down the line, the mother was with the girl at the local grocery store, because it's a small town. And the mother saw him, and she basically confronted him and took him off to the side and said, "Hey, now that you know our secret, basically, need to keep it hush hush." So how true that story is, I don't know, but the key element was the transformation. And Dogman portals, there's still that unexplained aspect of it. They go in and out. They come to, I think when they come to our reality, they are bound. And this is the Dogman that stays permanently in its form. They're bound to our physics and laws of the laws of physics and everything else that we have going on. So, but the supernatural aspect, I mean, you have ghosts that, defy that logic. So is there a connection? Yeah, I would say that there is some type of connection between the two, the werewolf and the Dogman. It's just the thing I guess most people, struggle to I guess reconcile is how much of the supernatural abilities do you put on the Dogman versus the werewolf? That they both have a supernatural aspect, one more than the other, but I think they're tied. There's a connection there. So, I mean, this whole Dogman thing is really perplexing.
The more you learn about it, the more
questions
you have.
Yeah,
I have studied countless cases at this point, and I've never even bothered to count. But I've heard so many people have told me so many stories, and I get more all the time. I mean, just since this show has been up the last couple of weeks, we've gotten a bunch more have poured in. I really don't know what to think of it. I mean, like the late J.C. Johnson, like I remember listening to a show of his one day, and I couldn't even tell you which one it was. I know that he did a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he
He
did.
was a very interesting man, but he had a show that I listened to one time, and it was, he was saying like these people will basically, just to put it in a nutshell, like they make a deal somehow, and they transform, but then they get stuck. And that's what he said. And I remember in the show he was talking about, like, it's like he was putting it in layman terms, like, hey, they go and they stalk around someone's property and they can't change back. And then, then they'll communicate with someone they know and be like, hey, it's me, Harvey.
Hmm.
He just used that word, that name. I remember him saying something like that, and it's like, don't shoot me. I'll keep trespassers off your property and whatever. I'm stuck like this.
Yeah, so they make it's kind of like what you're saying is they're making a Faustian deal with the devil.
So,
for
yeah,
lack of better
that's
words.
kind of how he said
And
that
then they
there's some
cross-
sort of deal that they made,
And they cross the devil. So guess what? You cross the devil, you're boof. You're
or they
staying
just
in this.
can't change back. For whatever
That's
reason.
true. I mean, it's really interesting that I'd never heard that. Actually, I'm gonna have to go dig and
You
find.
got to go back and look at. He did a lot of
his
different
work.
interviews, and he was very like, he didn't really care what people thought. It's like if you didn't believe him, you didn't believe him. He was just speaking what he believed were his truths, and he believed that the Native Americans could do that, but that there was a European element that could do it too. And I know that in particular, the Vikings and the Celts had a very, very strong shapeshifter beliefs. And so, anyways, Chris, any you just whatever else you want to say, let's move along here. I just thought that was very interesting.
Yes.
What you said about the whole being ill and feeling like a sense of foreboding or dread, so to speak.
Absolutely. Excuse me, but yeah, yeah, definitely. It was a very interesting experience, I will say. And for me, as someone who's never really talked about experiences because I've never really had them before, but now I'm having them, whether because of what I'm doing as a researcher or because of this the sake being that there is something there. But I believe it is the sake of the latter of that. But anyways, um, you mentioned about Europe and the whole mythology, well, at least with Vikings and whatnot. But it's interesting because there is in the European case that I've covered, but it's timid. It's one of those cases, but there is breakthrough results with it, which personally have been very effective, which has worked. And what I mean by this is that I'm talking about a case where I insisted the help of two other researchers that were trying. We were basically, through the work of social media, helped a woman get a dog man off her property.
Wow.
And this is a case that I had originally mentioned on Vic's show for his 200th, but I never specified necessarily on the continuation of what happened afterwards because there was a lot that happened. So I'll give you guys the rundown and then I'll tell you what we had done and the results. So
Please do, brother. Lay it on us.
this woman, since October of 2017, had had activity. So from currently now, which is the 30th of April, from 2017 all the way up to now, so close to almost 2 years. So approximately in that case, you have literally 2.5 years almost of just pure like activity from various and little stuff too. This started as a simple light bulb taken out of a socket outside. They have this interesting looking like, and this is in South Yorkshire, by the way. I just want to make that clear. This is in South Yorkshire. I cannot specify where exactly in South Yorkshire, but that is where it's at. What I will say though is that the activity that had occurred at first, it started very small, light bulb being taken out. Then it started to get a little interesting. The bumper of the caravan that the family owned, the bumper and the converter were completely ripped from its hinge and was left outside with claw marks. There's photographic evidence I can showcase with you guys that shows that. and you could see it. So the thing is that when you're looking and what I'm looking at, this converter was pulled along with the bumper, and then there's claw marks on the converter, which convinces me that it's not like a bear. If there's any bear in the area, it's not like an animal that has a thick cut that are similar to like a bear, but a like a wolf mark almost. You can't tell me that that is your normal zoological creature doing that. So a little while after that incident, you have the family constantly having on and off events. I'm not going to give away too much. All I'm going to say simply is that the activity got so heavy that there was apparently a situation that occurred last year where this creature had gotten a stone and started ripping small parts off of this giant stone wall, and had gotten a stone, a small piece, and threw it through their window. And for some people out there that think that dogmen just go ahead and just look through windows and stuff, and in my opinion, that right there is a scenario that's pretty heavy. Like that just shows how violent these things are. This woman also had set up surveillance cameras. We have photograph stills of what appears to be a creature staring right next to the caravan, and that's pretty interesting stuff, which I could showcase to you guys because there is activity on a property. We also have another claw marks and everything like that, footprints. So this woman had a lot of activity. So I was throwing a little bit of advice there and there, but I realized that my advice wasn't strong, that my solutions weren't working. So I enlisted the help of two other researchers whom I've interviewed and have spoken to. And these researchers, we all sat down, we all did a group chat and talked to this woman who had had the encounters. We talked about the history. Now, I'm going to just throw this out here, and for some people who might not quite understand it, I'll try to do it best summarize. Maybe you guys may have heard of this theory before, but when creatures like dogmen, whom have a mena pick up on negative fumes like cologne fragrances and even like dirty old food, well, food, something that can attract, for nutrient or whatever, however they food or go through anything like that, but also just sound of or sense of just like blood and stuff, and or basically what we were narrowing down here was the lifestyle of how this individual was running her life. We changed her lifestyle around when it came to certain uses, such as, a garden that was once not really usable, use the garden, make a garden out of it, or make something nice, make it look beautiful, or something like that. Now, I know that sounds a little odd and off centered, but what I'm saying is the activity that has occurred, it was under the impression the way the lifestyle of this individual was running it was what was triggering this dog man to have a negative reaction, from picking up on negative smells to the way the place was basically overlooked and for how they were living their lifestyle. Because you would think that this creature would follow where this woman lives. Her mother lives in the same area, but how the mother lives her lifestyle, it's like it wouldn't follow. So what I'm saying is, you say that these creatures could easily follow, even if it's from a small distance. So the way she was running her lifestyle wasn't the way this creature was agreeing and picking up on the perimeter. And and I even thought this too, that maybe there was backstory or history at this place that would attract this creature. That wasn't the case, which was unfortunate because the whole theory behind that, which was given by these two researchers, really were, to me, confusing, and it is a confusing sense, but it's because of what we said, maybe, and it sounds like something you'd hear on like the HDTV channel, like literally. We just the whole lifestyle thing. The way she would do normal day activities to change him around, and for some reason, after this incident, everything after the beginning of this year, things calmed down. There was not a single sighting of this creature on her property. But here's the other thing, though. Where she lives, there's activity all throughout. So whether other people are going through the same thing, and it's the way it's being lived throughout the village or something, because there's people on the community form of that village reporting missing animals, missing. There's a case of just a whole bunch of missing animals, and people reporting almost getting sideswiped by something's throwing rocks around this area. And there's a few villages around this place, but still. So that's basically the case of the South Yorkshire incident I'm working on, and I've spoken to several people who've commented about North Yorkshire, West, and it's a lot. So if you guys have taken that in and understood it, feel free to ask away if you have any questions about it, because it's a little confusing, but that's kind of what was the gist of what that case we can do, which was to simply get uh, what was appeared to be tough at first. We were able to, it somehow worked, and we've given updates, and the place and everything looks fine. There's no source of activity on her property. So whether it was because of what we insisted on everyday lifestyle, and that's what it's come down to, where it just stopped showing up, but it still lurks in the area clearly.
Well, if I may, Chris.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, no, this may sound strange. Some people may poo-poo it, but you've people have watched. You can watch a lot of these movies about the Old West, right? When the settlers were moving west and they come across Indian land, Native Americans, right? And you think about the Native Americans; they had their way of life, they had their lifestyle going, right? And now you've got European settlers moving into their area. Now, granted, we're always told through history that a lot of these settlers, suffered this bad, this bad experience living near them, and they'd leave or whatever the case may be. But then it's something that you seldom ever hear about, how certain settlers moved into an area near these Native Americans that had their own lifestyle and everything else, and they came in, settled in, started doing things that would not upset the balance of how they were living. Just to give an example, I don't know if anybody's watched that series called Outlander. It's on Stars. It's really good. Anyways, but in one part, when they're in, colonial America, they are living in the same area with, I believe it was the Iroquois. And in order to live in harmony, well, these, the settlers did certain things that was, like, for example, put up certain signs or do certain things near rivers and areas, so that way the Iroquois that would come through that area could see that, hey, these people are friendly. We know that there is there's white people over there living right down this, mile away or whatever, but they're friendly with us, so we're not going to bother them. They know we're in the area, so on and so forth. In regards to this, to the dogman-ness activity, that potentially the whole lifestyle thing you proposed, you and those other guys, makes sense. What she was doing may not have been conducive to what that dogman likes, and we have to take into consideration that they have human level intelligence, so that if they have human level intelligence, due to all the anecdotal reports of people and how they react to them, they have that level of intelligence, then they're going to have their idiosyncrasies about them that they will not budge on. They're going to expect this, and that, because in a sense, they're seeing these people encroaching on their property or land, if you will. So the lifestyle change to me makes perfect sense just because of the fact they have the ability to think at a human level. And her changing her lifestyle and not doing certain things and everything else they find pleasing, and enough to where they're like, okay, they straighten their act up. We'll just let them know that we're still in the area, but we don't need to bother them anymore because they're not, for lack of better words, dirtying up our our range, our land that we hunt in, or whatever the case may be. That to me makes perfect sense.
I got a question for you, Chris. You were talking about the lifestyle changes, the things that needed to be done. This was all physical, right? There was nothing spiritual, metaphysical, like and that needed to be. This creature was to you, and for all intents and purposes, a flesh and blood being. It had nothing to do with witchcraft or with any sort of supernatural element, no sort of paranormal element to it. It was just a flesh and blood being.
Personally, I believe that what I was told, because this was all written to me through Messenger. So I only had a glimpse of it through another perspective. So I can only theorize what I believed what to be from the reports. I feel that if it was something that was a spiritual type vibe, I feel it would have done something a whole lot more damage than what it was initially, or at least it would have gotten to that point. It's hard to tell in a sense because I don't know really what it was or what could have been dealt with. If anything, it sounds to me like it was, and this is just from the past year and a half, just simply reading this individual's report of what she was dealing with. And at the end of the day, I think what she was having on her property was 100% flesh and blood. And I feel that, in a sense, too, though, that if it was supernatural, there would have been elements to me that would have just stood out. For example, such as the tampering of the surveillance footage. There would be something to me I'd feel would deliver an electrical vibe that would make it sound like there's something going on, or just tamper with it to make it sound like it has an error or can't play this footage. You know what I'm saying? Something that would tamper or make it like if the creature was appeared on a surveillance camera, or something around that margin. There was a situation that she had mentioned to me that the webcam or the surveillance camera, whatever you want to call it, was moved briefly to the side. So that can leave out, to me, I don't think it would simply supernatural presence like make it move. It could if it truly did, but a lot of what I had seen, or from when it came to photos and from when it came to just the vibe of what she was telling me, I don't think it was supernatural at all, or it was. I feel it was just a flesh and blood creature, one that, much like Sal had mentioned, when it came to the land, the respect of the land, just looking out property wise.
So, are you saying that this thing was like offended by the aesthetics of the property?
I mean, personally, I don't like. I don't want to make it sound like it, because that sounds like, what could cause all that necessarily, or make it sound like it's a little goofy in a sense. But I don't know personally. What I know is that if it was in a sense, and that's what was going on because of that, then maybe 80% of encounters or people who deal with these things on their property, that could be the solution. We don't know that because those people either A, haven't really come forward with it, or haven't thought about it.
I got something for you. There's a story that I was given years ago by a relative of mine, and this happened supposedly down in central Mexico. This relative of mine was from northern Mexico, but she married someone and lived in central Mexico. This was like a long time ago. This would have been actually one of my ancestors. It was like
over 100 years ago?
Yeah,
maybe?
it was a story that my great aunt gave me
Mhm.
about her aunt.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this was like somebody from way back.
Yeah.
And they believed very strongly in the whole shapeshifter aspect of it. The lechuza is a very real thing to them, which is a bird with a human
owl.
head.
Yeah.
Or it could become an owl. It's a witch, a bruja, if you will. And then, of course, there is also an element of, it's like I was saying about the jaguar-headed men. There's these different types of entities. This was somebody who had a dispute with someone else, a property dispute. This guy owned a ranch, and he had a lot of cattle. And he married someone who this other lesser well-to-do landowner was jealous because he wanted his son to marry this particular female from another family. And so my great aunt, I guess she'd be whatever, was I guess she witnessed this or whatever. And this wolf like entity began to appear around the property and began to destroy the property, began to tear things up, and began to devour animals. It destroyed cattle. It killed chickens. It didn't drive them into the poorhouse. This wasn't like the Hernandez Ranch. This wasn't like all these other things we've heard about, these ranches where these dogmen or wolfmen, whatever, can literally just destroy your life. This thing was more of a pest, of a nuisance. And of course, the ranchers were convinced that this was the work of black magic.
Mhm.
And that's another reason why this story has not been told on Vic's show, because when presented with these kind of stories, Vic usually doesn't,
No,
he
Vic
doesn't-
sticks to what
he
people-
sticks to it's a flesh and blood creature.
Yeah, that's what Vic does.
Which, like I said, with me, I'm kind of mixed feelings about it because, I don't see why a Sasquatch or a dogman, a flesh and blood creature, would really care about the property and how it looked, unless it was some sort of like they were leaving garbage out or something like that was attracting them. That's because that will attract animals, any kind of animals. Because I've actually worked on a property that was completely overrun by raccoons, and they would I would sit down outside of my truck, and I would sit up on the deck because they had a really nice deck, and there was actually a little creek out behind it. And so I would sit out there, and it was kind of peaceful until dark, and then I would just kind of go back to my truck. But these raccoons would come up and pull on your pant leg. I mean, they were so ridiculous. They started to try to break into the property, and oddly enough, I figured out that they were the culprits. They thought that somebody was trying to break into their trailer. Well, it was the raccoons.
They were looking for something.
I
to
figured it
scrounge.
out. No, I solved the case. I mean, it was like I told the property owner, I said, I can keep taking your money, but you're guarding against raccoons, and it's because you're leaving garbage out. Your workers are literally, leaving wrappers and stuff, and they're leaving it with the tools, and they're digging through the tools, and it looks like somebody's coming and taking stuff and throwing them everywhere and moving things around. It's not vandalism, and it's not people breaking in. It's raccoons, and it was so crazy when I figured it out. And so, anyways, we had another couple guards that had them jump up on their lap. I mean, and raccoons carry rabies, so that's scary, But I'm getting off subject here, but I'm just using that as an example. Like that's just an animal. That's what an animal will do. If it is literally just a flesh and blood animal, it's going to be attracted to certain aspects of your lifestyle, like how clean you are would attract it. But if you're just talking about the aesthetics of the property, like it doesn't like that your yard is unkept, that to me smacks of like someone actually using this entity to create havoc for someone they don't like. Like maybe this sounds kind of odd and maybe even a little too simplistic, but like a neighbor is not liking you, so they summon something to attack your property.
That speaking in strictly the supernatural realm on that, that's been part and parcel of, you know, a lot of Mexican folklore and everything else. You know, neighbor doesn't like the other neighbor that moved in, and so, you know, we'll put a curse on them type deal and do black magic. When you look at it for, you know, on the side of, or through the lens, should I say, is a better choice of words. You look at it through the lens of looking at a flesh and blood creature that has human level intelligence. The possibility is there that they could not like what they're doing on their property just because it's not pleasing to them. And along with, you know, the trash, I would venture to say that they would enjoy the trash kind of being out there because they can rummage through it and see if there's any food. Flesh and blood creature, you know, you won't get raccoons come around very much unless there is a potential food source around where you're at. And if you're not living very clean and leaving trash everywhere, well, you can bet you're going to get all the critters come around.
Mm-hmm. Skunks.
And these dog men, in that respect, you know, they are primal in that particular sense, but they display a human level type intelligence. So the potential's there. I would never discard that particular option, that this particular creature did not like what they saw, just on that simple fact that they do display human level intelligence. But realistically, do we know? No, but what she did put into place, that plan of action, you know, definitely got her, you know, relieved of having to deal with all these interactions with that dog man, because obviously it was, you know, a physical being that went over there and ripped off that bumper and everything else. And then the unscrewing of the light bulb, you know, if she's never had any real paranormal activity on that property, and then all of a sudden, you know, a light bulb starts out with a light bulb being unscrewed. Well, Wolf has done a few stories on Vic's channel in regards to a dog man unscrewing a light bulb. So it's you know, it's really, first of all, it's great that she got it all under control, and second, you know, I would say that, yeah, because of the fact they display human level intelligence, and that could possibly be what, you know, they liked or disliked, and she fixed it, and there you are. The activity slowed down. So, I mean, there's so many things, because there's so many unknown factors about a dog man.
Well, this particular entity that was doing this in Mexico, from what I remember, the story was just, the way it was relayed to her was that eventually they sought out a priest, you know, and the problem was solved. Eventually, it came out that person had used, you know,
black magic, brujeria.
So I guess a brujeria, and then they had a curandero come in and heal everybody or whatever. You know, and the day was saved by the healer or whatever. And that was also a pseudo priest, I think, is what it was, but not quite. It was like a curandero.
Yeah, the curandero.
But it was more like, you know, like, I guess, a man of faith or whatever. But the thing that gets me about the whole story is that it is very reminiscent of, you know, what goes on. Mexico is steeped in things like that, and so someone will offend someone, and then they use magic, and of course an entity appears in some shape or form, and wackiness ensues, and then somebody has to put it down. Well, that to me, though, you know, and like I said, we go back to J.C. Johnson saying that about these people messing with these things, that, you know, that they seek out this magic, and then they shapeshift, but then, you know, mistakes happen and they're stuck, you know, and so then they become a completely flesh and blood entity that's running around out there. And of course, people will say, well, I've seen so many things, like how they said that it just takes an enormous amount of energy to do something like that. And I'm like, how could you really know? Because there's no way to really, you know, the world that we know, I think it's not as cut and dry as we think it is. It's illusory in a lot of ways too. And so who knows what's really going on. That story you said is very interesting in the way that someone's lifestyle and the way that they were keeping their property invited this creature. It's just, I don't know, maybe they offended someone. I mean, is that possible, Chris? I mean, you know more about it than we do, or we're speculating here, but is that possible?
Well, I thought of two things. The thing is that when this case was presented to me, at first I just thought of it as just a simple, maybe fascination with electronics, because there is a tendency where people have had reports of lights being knocked out or something like that in reference, like Christmas lights even were pulled during one winter encounter I received. And it, I felt it was just maybe, I feel the history of the area in general and the fact that what was mentioned about land, could it possibly just like, it's like this is territory and it's in their sense disrespectful, or it was indeed something that I feel was about her, whether it was bloodline or something about her in general that it was attracted to, that felt that it was like okay, like a connection almost, but a certain type of connection of whether it was a change of lifestyle or about them for whatever the case may be. I still don't know because I wasn't there. I don't really know the sense of the place. I only just see what I've been told and seen through photographs.
One thing, though, if I may, Chris, we cannot discount on the Dogman. Okay, one thing we cannot discount is the fact of all of the abilities it has, i.e., you've got a Dogman, average Dogman that we hear about 7 to 8 feet tall. Okay, um, canine head. Well, like I've said before many times, you've got the smelling ability of a canid. And I'm a firm believer that wolves have a sharper sense of smell than our domesticated dogs do. Their hearing, same thing, way, way better than ours, can hear it at a much broader range than we can, and even our dogs, and along with the eyesight. So the sense of smell in this case, like Josh was mentioning, something, and you mentioned as well, is something about her, a bloodline, something intrinsic to her that they could pick up on, that they find pleasing. Again, we're speculating, but that's a possibility in and couple that with human level intelligence. I mean, gosh, we could speculate on that all day, but I wouldn't discount that particular fact. So I would leave that option open.
I think that there's a lot of researchers at this time that would like to just make that and Sasquatch both just be just flesh and blood, hardcore physical entities, so that we can eventually one day capture them, study them, classify them, and make them known, And I just don't feel like that's the case. I really don't feel like we're dealing with completely flesh and blood creatures. Now, I do think that maybe there may be flesh and blood creatures that is a Sasquatch and a Dogman. There may be. But there is definitely something else going on there. There is a supernatural element to these creatures, and a lot of people have discussed this. They have talked about how they just kind of have the ability to appear and disappear. The case hits home to me, and I would like to get her on the show at some point, is my wife. Like, that's how I met her, was through the Dogman thing, and the encounter that she had was very esoteric, if you would say,
very supernatural.
Yeah, and it just, I don't know how to describe that. I mean, all I can say about my encounter was that it was in a ditch. It stood up, ran across the road on two legs, physical. Very physical, and then it came through the in between the two properties. It looked like a physical flesh and blood creature. The funny thing was, though, is like after it appeared by the window and then it just was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't know where it went. This is a very large creature. Like, it had to have been out there somewhere.
Yeah.
But it disappeared so quickly, that, like, who knows? Maybe it walked into a portal. Maybe it vanished. I have no idea. I just know that we get these reports all the time of these creatures. There's one that a lady told me about in the Northeast on the beach. And they have a house, up in Maine, and like right there, I guess on the coast, there's like the shoreline, and their house is against the coast, and this wolf type creature would just walk along the beach every day and just kind of like looking down at the ground, and then it would just vanish. and they reported this for like days, weeks. The same thing. It would appear at dusk, and it was like clockwork. They invited people to witness this. I mean, this like just kept happening for years. It started like back in the 70s, and then it started to kind of dissipate, and then it started back up, in like the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very weird case, and like, of course, like what do you make of that? What is this? Is this a residual haunting of a werewolf? Or a dog man? I mean, what is it? Like, you can't. It's hard to put your finger on these things. The Serbian werewolf story that me and Sal have actually covered. We haven't released that episode yet, but by the airing of this, it may or may not be released. I don't know. It depends on how we release it. But we covered that case. It was a case that me and my brother actually spoke to the people, and it did some very odd things, like the case that Vic and me discussed on his show in San Diego. One of the rare times that Vic came out of the
physical,
the supernatural. He came out of the non-supernatural, and we talked about how there was forced exit, but not forced entry into this woman's home. That is, to me, just so strange. And the more you hear about these cases of these creatures, the more it puzzles me that this thing targeted this person's home in particular. Just kind of puzzles me, like what why. There's so many questions, like it's weird, man. Like, and then like you said, the lights. That's another thing I hear a lot about, is that they don't like light. Certain, I don't really get that, because like, most creatures, I mean, like, unless it's doing something it's not supposed to be doing, like, I don't know. It just seems odd to me. I don't know.
I guess the word you're looking for on that, unless it feels it's intrusive, because, you can watch tons of footage on how animals react to a light coming on all of a sudden. Wild animals in general will take off, except raccoons. Raccoons are just...
raccoons don't really care.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, too. I've lit them and coyotes up with light, on many occasions, and they just kind of keep doing what they're doing.
Right.
The more accustomed they become to the light,
I think that's
the less they care. So these creatures obviously are used to being in the darkness,
Couple that with human intelligence, and if their prime directive is to stay hidden, any type of light is going to, trigger them to say, hey, I'm out of here, because this light turns on immediately. You could run down, you could logically think, light comes on, somebody's going to see me, and then other shenanigans may ensue. I'm better off out of here. So, there's a lot of aspects that we could sit and speculate for days, brother.
Day. Chris, I know that you're pressed for time, so if you want to, we could wrap this up for now, and we can come back to it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony, and I'm the editor of Paranormal Round Table. Just letting y'all know that we will be dropping the second part of this episode with Chris Cyrus this coming Tuesday. We want to keep y'all coming back for more, and if you like what you hear, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe on YouTube or whatever platform that you found us on. And if you're on YouTube, there's going to be a little bell icon right next to that subscribe button. Click that, and YouTube will give you a nice little reminder every time we drop a new episode. And if you have your own encounter with the paranormal, don't be afraid to send Wolf and Sal an email at doswolfman88@gmail.com or wolfandsal@gmail.com. Thank you to Chris Cyrus for supporting our show and for being a part of it. Thank you to all the listeners, to the subscribers for showing your support. We hit 4,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for your love and support. And with that being said, good night.